First, giving honor to God, giving honor to Bishop, and to the entire Greater family. Before I get started with my message, I would like to thank Bishop Gresham for this wonderful opportunity to stand here at this sacred desk. Exodus chapter 17, verses 10 and 11 is what I will be reading today. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. As Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired. The subject that I've chosen this afternoon is don't get caught with your hands down.
Right there.
In the exciting sport of boxing, there's a famous athlete by the name of Muhammad Ali, a man that is arguably the greatest boxer of all time. Many of you might know his famous phrase, "I can float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. That's why they call me Ali." Yes, Mr. Ali was great and he was bad. But what I found most interesting, Bishop, about Ali was his unique style of boxing. He would always fight his opponents with his hands down. Ali was so good, he had his own style. They called it the Ali Shuffle. Earlier in his career, the strategy worked like a charm. But as the years crept by, his quickness began to fade. Where there was once glory and greatness, there was now tremendous trepidation.
Wow.
Ali began to lose fights consecutively, so much so that it was one fight that in particular that he had to rush, his trainer had to rush into the ring to stop the fight because he was taking way too many shots to the head. And as a result of the countless number of blows that he took, Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which is a disease that is not curable. I highly doubt if Ali or anyone in this world would have ever thought that the greatest boxer of all time would have been forced into this early retirement. But the truth is, my brothers and my sisters, is that his opponents caught him too many times with his hands down. He now has an illness that will affect him for the rest of his life, all because he failed to keep his hands lifted. In our text this afternoon, we find Moses having the same problem and inside the same predicament. He's having trouble keeping his hands lifted. Verse 10 says that after Moses gave instructions to Joshua, and after Aaron and Hur joined him on the high place, the Israelites went into battle with the Amalekites. Then verse 11 says that as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But when Moses' arms became heavy and his hands started to fall down, that's when the Amalekites began to win. My brothers and sisters, I would like to suggest and submit to you that there are too many times in our Christian lives where we are like the hands of Moses, where one minute we are up, but the next minute we are down. When we have our hands lifted, when we have our standards of life high, when we have our lives in a daily posture of worship and adoration, that is when we are in position to defeat our enemies. But when our hands start to come down, when our standards of life become compromised, and when we stop seeking after our Lord and our Savior, that is when we become exposed to the enemy. This, ladies and gentlemen, presents a major problem in the kingdom because the more and more we compromise our faith and our worship to do our own thing, we give the devil way too much room to work. That's why I believe it's time out for those of us who play part-time Christian lives but with the pleasures of a full-time Savior. It's time out for those of us who have those palace desires but pit mentalities of everyday worship. It's time out for those of us who have our hands lifted up high on Sunday morning but down the rest of the week. This is why I argue, Pastor James, about the church being in the state that is in and not being as effective as it could be, because the devil is using our saints of God to build up his kingdom. I said the devil is using the church to build up his kingdom, and he's doing it by encouraging this dichotomous style of living, where one foot chooses to sing in the choir, but the other foot chooses to dance in the club, or where one foot preaches the word in the pulpit, but the other is in someone else's bedroom, where one foot is worshiping, praising, and to stop playing with God? When are we going to lift up our hands without bringing them down? This is how the Israelites won against the Amalekites. Moses received assistance from Aaron and Hur by first leading him to a rock to help his foundation. Then they helped him with his hands being lifted. One stood on each side of Moses so that he could stay connected to God. And it was because of this the Israelites received the victory over their enemy. But as I head to my close, the text gives clarity as to how you and I can defeat the Amalekites and or enemies in our lives. Notice, if you please, verse 12 states that Aaron and Hur must have been in close proximity to Moses when he began to struggle with his hands. In Moses' time of need, he had people who were around him, who were able to help him when he became weak. May I suggest this last thing to you? Make sure you have the right people around you and in your proximity who can get you closer to Christ, closer to the Lord, instead of leading you further away. Because there's too many of us entertaining unproductive relationships. But in all actuality, we need people who are concerned about our hands being lifted up to God and not up someone's dress or down someone's pants. But I've got good news for you as I take my seat. And Moses wasn't the only one. There was another man that was able to do the same up on Calvary's cross. And even though he died on a Friday, he rose early one Sunday morning with all power in his hand. The Bible describes him. So he was wounded for our transgression. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him. And by his stripes we are healed. And I've come to let someone know today that if you get connected with God, the Bible declares that eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither has it entered into the hearts of man the great things that he has in store for them. Don't get caught with your hands down. Keep your hands lifted. Keep your standards of life high. And keep your eyes stayed on Jesus, so that in the end, when it's all said and done, you can claim victory over your enemy.